really for the creation, the dissemination, and the application of knowledge. And we have evolved to talk about them as the three pillars: teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. And they all have to do with various parts of that knowledge: the creation, dissemination, and application of knowledge. But they haven't been equally emphasized over all time. The early universities, and particularly in this country, the universities that have been around for the longest, the oldest ones are a little bit over 100 years, really emphasized teaching in the beginning, and research became a very, very big thing in the kind of 60s and 70s, and got bigger and bigger and bigger, as we all know. And community engagement, only really in the 21st century, community engagement as a pillar of the universities only started being talked about really in the 2000s. And we saw that timeline that Dr. Margaret Irvin put up in an earlier talk this afternoon, that talked about the way things had gone at Rhodes University, where I think it was 2008, was the first time that Rhodes Senate had a subcommittee on community engagement. And that's really not a long time ago. And that doesn't mean that community engagement wasn't being done a long time ago. I was just sitting in a talk now where Philip Irvine was talking about projects that were being done in the 1800s in bio control of the natural environment. So community engagement as a concept has been around really as long as scholarship has been around, but really in niche areas in universities and research institutions, and obviously various NGOs and so on. Niche disciplines as well. And we've seen this huge explosion of community engagement. And I want to also mention transdisciplinary research, because I think the two have gone together. We've seen quite a repositioning of research. It's not really a fad. I think at one stage community engagement was thought to be a fad, and at one time I think transdisciplinary research was thought to be a fad. But we've seen how big international funders have changed their funding directives to move more and more towards transdisciplinary research, where many angles of a problem are attacked from many disciplinary directions. And there's starting to be big funding behind that. And many of those projects are real-life projects that involve the natural world and humans, of course. And even those that are directed at the natural world, almost always. In fact, I can't think of one that doesn't involve humans. Why? Because we are the species that's stuffing up the natural world, basically. And so community engagement in those transdisciplinary projects is huge. And so I think we've seen the fact that processes in universities in particular have had to catch up with the reality rather than the other way around. Okay, I think we're going to talk mainly about ethical approval process in this section. But before we get to that, let me tell you how new those are. We live, I think, in the age of compliance, and we often are offended by the level of what we see as bureaucracy and formalism that go along with that compliance. And the offense often comes from the fact that it seems like we are being told as researchers that before these processes came along, we were doing unethical things. And I'm sure some people were doing unethical things. But for the most part, research in community partners has been done for a very long time by very, very ethical people. That's my view anyway. And if you go back to some of the research I know about, I mean, there's plenty, obviously I don't, but some that I know about from Rhodes University, going back into the 1960s, some fantastic work being done by very ethical people in areas like anthropology and the Institute for Social. In 2003, so we're talking about just over 20 years ago, and the big thing that act did was it established the National Health Research Ethics Council, which is the council that oversees all research ethics in this country to this day. And the regulations to ends. And so one of the big culture clashes we've seen, because all of this really is about institutional culture, the development of culture at institutions, and in fact in the global academy, the kind of culture of scholarship in the global academy. One of the big clashes is that the further away we've been from health, the harder the clash has been with these formalisms. These formalisms all came out of health ethics, and when you got further and further away from that science health paradigm into the humanities and into the social sciences, even more uncomfortable. Many of the processes have been extremely uncomfortable for researchers. And I think a lot of valuable lessons have been learned, and a lot of processes have evolved over this time, and I'm not going to suggest any because we have Dr. Janet Hayward on this panel, who I'm hoping will do that. And really, she's way more qualified than me because she's been at the coalface of evolving uncomfortable processes into workable spaces. So, Janet, I hope you're going to talk about that. So let me just finish off by suggesting what key lessons I think we can draw from the past and where we are now going into the future. And I think they are these. All of scholarship is built on the foundation of peer review. I mean, that's what we're used to. That's what's very entrenched in research life. That's how we run our journals. That's how external examiners do our theses work. We get experts in the area who are peer reviewed. And so that's unlikely to change significantly going into the future. So there's no substitute in the community engagement space, and particularly in community-based participatory research, I think, for real peers. The kind of flip side of that is to say to all of you who are the champions for this, you don't get off the hook. This whole process is not going to evolve in the right direction as we go forward if you are not involved as peers. It means that all of us who want to see it evolve in a more appropriate direction for community-engaged research need to be participatory people in terms of peers for proposals, obviously, but also for peers in the process development as we go forward. So that's really my message. It's only with your participation. It's going to evolve, we know that, but only with your participation is it going to evolve smoothly in a direction that works for community engagement. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you so much, Prof. Clayton. I'll now hand over to Dr. Janet Hayward, and as I said, she's the chairperson of the Rhodes University Human Research Ethics Committee, and we've been very fortunate to travel this journey with Janet as we navigated engaged research ethics. So Janet will just give some further insight into the institutional processes as it relates to engaged research ethics, but also how community engagement has influenced and transformed the ethical review process.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I'm an anthropologist by training, which I think set me up very well for what I do now, because I really value, firstly, research, the value of research, and of course, all my own research has been very engaged with communities. I did my PhD research along the wild coast of the Transkei, living amongst Mpondo communities for months on end. So my research has always been very engaged. In terms of the formal ethics process at Rhodes, much like other universities, the applicant is required to know exactly what their question is, who their participants are. They must have their research instruments, they must upload them. All of these things, of course, fly in the face of engaged research. And when I took over in mid-2022, there were no processes for community, for engaged research, but lots and lots of questions as to what people should do if they wanted to do this. So starting in February the following year, I think it's been going on for almost 18 months now, I have implemented a system whereby we have what we call scoping approval. So that gives the applicant will fill in a form, which is available on the Rhodes Ethics website. The form asks a few questions to try and elicit from the person how much they know about what they want to do. Because to my mind, the most important thing about engaged research is reversing the top-down tendency of all research. Most research is absolutely researcher-centered. The researcher knows the question they want to ask, they know who they want to ask the question to, they define the whole thing. The huge importance to my mind of engaged research is allowing the community to shape the research, to shape the question, to work out who the participants should be, to have some say on what the methodologies are going to be. So obviously your ordinary traditional research ethics application is impossible when you don't know what your question is, when you want to shape that in collaboration with the community. So our scoping application will ask a few questions to be sure that because many people think engaged research sounds like a nice thing to do, but they actually know what they want to do. So if that's the case, we will say, just apply for ethics clearance because you know your question, you know your participants, just go ahead with your research. When it comes to engaged research, we really want to make sure that it is engaged and that the person, the researcher, is shaping the research in collaboration with the community. And if we're satisfied with that, we will give the scoping approval. It's a 3-month approval, but it can be extended if necessary. And that allows the researcher to interact with the community, to workshop with them, all of the things I've been talking about. And once that process has been concluded, and the community as well as the researcher are all on the same page, you can then, the researcher then must still apply for clearance in the ordinary way. So that dialogue with the community is really a dialogue. There cannot be any data collection during that process. That process is workshopping and planning. It's a planning phase. Once they've completed that, they then apply for ordinary ethics clearance, because by that stage they know their question, they know their participants, they can devise their instruments. They might even have devised their instruments in collaboration with the community. So that is really how we have been influenced by community engagement, in the sense that we have opened up our procedures to make it possible for people to do it. I still feel, I mean, in fact, I don't feel it's clear that the majority of our research applications are all still with a conventional top-down approach to research. We do have increasing, we have maybe, I think in total I've had maybe 12 engaged applications in this 18 months I'm talking about. So it's there and it's happening, but what I would envisage and hope in the future is that it's going to grow, and that the future of research in South Africa, internationally hopefully, would be a far more bottom-up approach, research where the community is able to shape and define their own priorities. It's their priorities that should be taken into account in planning research. Thank you. Monica.
Thank you very much, Janet. We'll now hand over to Ms. Monica Kankra. And as I said, Monica is a manager from the Learning Trust, but I also serve with Monica on the Human Research Ethics Committee, and she'll just give us insights on the RU ethical review processes from a community partner lens. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, Renee. First of all, I want to express my excitement as a community development practitioner for engaged research, and in particular community-based participatory research, with regards to the possibilities that it holds for community development, and how it kind of like moves us away from the traditional approaches to research that were more of knowledge mining than developmental in nature. But also, while speaking on that, I would like to highlight the fact that by its nature of being very much contextually driven, community-based participatory research requires a lot of the researcher and the partnerships on the ground. That we would really not want to move away from one not so very inclusive way of conducting research to another way where it becomes just a buzzword of community-based participatory research because it's a new thing and everybody's excited about it. But also at the same time, there's a need to recognize that to actually understand it, you have to be able to have done it practically because it doesn't look the same. It's dictated by the context and it's not linear in nature. And theory isn't enough for somebody to say that they understand community-based participatory research. And I feel like if there isn't an acknowledgement of that, then it takes something away from the whole process, which holds so much potential for driving meaningful change. And with regards to ethics, the ethics are still very much designed within a framework that recognizes that there is an expert that goes into communities and that knows best how things should be run. And now, if you're saying that you want to engage on a deeper level with communities, especially using the community, the CPPR approach, which is driven by principles of relationship building, building of trust, collaboration, co-creation, then it means that there is a danger there of not understanding ethics the same way. And then where is the space created for those discussions to happen? That what might be ethical according to the university isn't necessarily so for the communities, because communities are not the same. Cultures differ, ways of doing things differ, ways of learning differ. I do understand the part where it says like there should be no harm done, but also what is harmful for one person cannot be harmful for the other person, depending on which side of the coin you're at. So we found it harmful that we're part of research processes where our voices were not heard, where people just came and they asked for knowledge and we gave knowledge and we didn't know what happened to that. When we consulted about dissemination processes, we didn't get to benefit from that process of knowledge creation. That was harmful to a certain extent. And from having been involved in one community engaged process, one actually sees the joy, the confidence, the hope that arises in a situation where you are collaborating and you are inviting people to come in and bring their voices. And then when you say come and bring your voices in the planning process, in the implementation process, then how do you again block and say, but university ethics don't allow us to do it that way or to go that far? Then is it really collaboration then? If there's still somebody that has the final say in what is ethical or not ethical, and that cannot be negotiated. So for me, these are the questions, and I understand that it is a process, and I really commend the willingness from the universities to want to embark on this journey with communities, but I also feel like we have to be very cognizant of these issues so that we are realistic about them, so that we create spaces to discuss them, and so that everybody understands that we need to build this together so that it really has the desired outcomes that we're all hoping for.
Thank you very much, Monica. Our last panelist to share their insights would be Dr. Martina Jordan from University of Pretoria and Ms. Jackie Skeeper-Sil from Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And they will reflect on institutional ethical processes from their respective institutions and also give us insight into challenges and opportunities.
So, greetings, everyone. I don't have all the answers. In fact, I want to start with some reflective questions. So, in terms of engaged research and the ethics thereof, do we see it as something separate from our own ethical and philosophical framework? Is it something that we take out of our backpacks and use within the higher education context, but they not live those principles? So I thought I'd start with that because for me it is also a personal ethical learning journey to engage in was a framework that has recently been published last year and made me do a lot of reflection and thinking, not only on a personal level, but also on an institutional level. So I thought, can we also speak about ethics in community engagement in engaged research without speaking about Ubuntu as a philosophy? And I know the term is, I know in our Vision 2030 we have Ubuntu as one of the values, and I'm sure in many other universities or in guidelines and frameworks, Ubuntu appears. But I wanted to just look at where Ubuntu really comes from, because I think it is very relevant to look at when we're using these terms and philosophies to understand that Ubuntu originated as an ancient holy belief with 7 cardinal virtues. Which are truth, justice, propriety, harmony, balance, reciprocity, service learning, reciprocity was there already, and order. So it is my thinking that Ubuntu within the CE context can act as a compass for the development of genuine project partnerships within these CE relationships, as we often call partnerships within the CE sector. So secondly, I wanted to talk about the principles of Socratic dialogue, because what is important for this framework is, and I think there's a few that I want to mention, is firstly, the improvement of our environment and our communication. All these concepts I'm trying to incorporate into our practices at CPUT, but we're not as advanced as Rhodes with so many of your wonderful work that you're doing. So the environment and communication as part of Socratic dialogue speaks about the creation of safe spaces and open communication. And then also for mutual respect and non-judgmental discussions. And I hear you, my colleagues, that we also need to look at what discourse are we speaking in, because you can be present, but you can be absent within that presence when we're speaking in higher education discourse. And as you've just said, that what works for you or what you see as ethical may not be the ethical considerations within the community context. So the other aspects of the Socratic dialogue, is the epistemological improvement, and that is understanding from your own perspective and that of others' perspectives. And then the rest is personal growth and being empowered, creating an environment where there is empowerment to listen to others. You know, often when you come from academia, you think you know because you have the theory, but the practices are happening out there for all those years already. But also to create this environment where there can be expression of desires, of hopes and fears and so on. And then obviously ethical improvement in these ethical partnerships, and to be aware of your actions and to be responsible for those actions or the impact of those actions on others. And the last one is relational improvement, because in these dialogical spaces that you are creating within the ethical research relationships, there is obviously growth, and there is, lessons that one can learn from within the team. Then also I wanted to talk about interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. Obviously, for engaged research, we want to reach the level of transdisciplinarity. There is, I do mention in Rhodes, your new journal, we do discuss what we call the knowledge castle, and many of our speakers have already discussed, and throughout the papers yesterday and today, we heard these terms of co-design, of co-research, co-production of knowledge, and co-dissemination. Often in these international research proposals that I've learned with my German partners, dissemination is actually a phase within those research proposals. I don't always see it in our local research proposals, where there are outputs and deliverables. And we're not just talking about a conference where academia speaks back to communities, but an integrated collaborative dissemination process where various forms of communication is expressed. And it's not enough to go back to the community and give a copy of your master's or your doctoral studies. It is actually living out the results of that study. In one high-level meeting I did also, we've got wonderful research in the areas of educational support for STEM, but are our teachers implementing the results of those studies? How are we reaching the very communities we think we are publishing and writing for? So the last aspect that I want to touch on is ethical leadership, which I think is very important in these research projects. And we want to talk about the transparency, fairness, accountability, and the competencies to lead. So when I went through the engaged research framework, I thought that there's going to be a lot of capacity building required in not just higher education, but within our collaborative partnership spaces. And lots of learning to be had for our, to move from our traditional practices of research to full engagement with our external stakeholders, and not just our communities, NGOs, NPOs, and civic organizations, but also with our government partners, because sometimes we speak about communities, but not all higher education institutions you know, think of the government partners as being a very, very important part of that communities. So just going quickly back to CPUT, I'm sure some of you remember the period when we spoke about research uptake, and I'm not sure what happened to that project. I think a lot was done at the time, where researchers were encouraged to take up very, very critical social issues, and I'm sure there were lots of success stories. But now we at CPUT, we are looking at how do we embrace this notion of engaged research, and how do we prepare our communities within and outside of the university. So it might be challenging, I suppose, because we do acknowledge that the university space is a space of silos. And we talk about transdisciplinary research. Those of you who are engaged in transdisciplinary research, you know that it is not easy, it's fraught with challenges. And just one basic challenge is the scheduling of getting people together, let alone if you have international partners, especially from the USA, who have, I think, 6 hours different time difference. So with these silos, we have faculty ethics committees, right? So if you have a lecturer, service learning lecturer in the Faculty of Education, they will go through the Faculty of Education's research processes, ethical processes. However, when it is a transdisciplinary project, there needs to be a place, a home for these transdisciplinary service learning, community engagement, engaged research projects, because you need a committee that has a very broad lens and not only looking at it from a unidisciplinary perspective. So we are in the process of looking at how we can establish that, and we will learn from the Rhodes case study as well, and looking at how we can build also across our three pillars. Because if you look at community engagement, I think we've always dabbled across the three pillars. I don't think we ever stayed in our lane. That's not the nature of community engagement. So we do need an ethical committee that can look across these three dimensions of higher education. So I think that will lead to greater impact and sustainability of our research projects. Just lastly, we were awarded an international grant from DART, which includes 3 institutions, CPUT, NUST in Namibia, and Flensburg University of Applied Sciences. And what was amazing about this grant is that the focus is on partnership building. And I've never seen a research grant like that ever, and they're giving us 4 years to develop these engaged research processes. So right from the beginning, we are going on a journey of the co-creation, co-collaboration, co-dissemination. And I'm excited, but I am scared as anything, because you can imagine just organizing meetings is going to be a big challenge. The other unique aspect is that it includes administrative support staff within the research team, and as well as community partners, as well as our industry partners. The 2 industry partners we have selected, one is a master's student in mechanical engineering, who is now also has his own social innovation project, and the other one is an industry partner who is also a graduate of CPUT, who is busy with a very technical project. All these projects are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it has to speak to all 3 countries, which is also going to be, I think, quite challenging but exciting. So I feel that with projects like these, yes, it's not easy to get funding, because I'm ending with quite a lot of questions like, how can we institutionalize these ethical approaches? How can we integrate these ethical approaches into our curricula? And what policies do we require? Because it's going to take us revisiting the policies, challenging what is on the table, being quite radical about it, and having to do a lot of advocacy work. And perhaps nationally, we can work together to drive this process. Thank you, colleague.
Thank you, Jackie. I'll hand over to Martina.
Good afternoon, and it's wonderful to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the University of Pretoria, and I did my research. I interviewed the chair of the Engineering Built Environment IT's ethical committee and the chair of the humanities, so I did my research. And I've been on the committee for a while. So I've got 4 questions, and I am going to answer the 4 questions. So at our university, they take ethics really, really very serious, and everyone is afraid of the ethics committee. That's really one of the things that we are afraid of. So there's this terrible online form that you need to complete with all sorts of prompts, but it's actually really user-friendly in the sense that you don't miss anything. So I did the ethics on the engaged research with Reverend Chris, and what was so great is I added him as my co-researcher, and then as we developed the research and as we worked the 3 years so far, we adapted the ethics the whole time. The only thing is that I had to adapt it and request another ethics. I'm doing now a research with Merrimack College, and the same is happening. We're adapting as we go. So there is this options for us to adapt and change. So that is one of the things. So my two interviewees was very adamant about this process, to say that there is this really very strict process and you need to fit in the process. There's no way to get out of the process. So how you fit in, you make very sure that you do this. So the challenges that we have and that they identified as really, really big challenges was not so much that the students were not aware of the ethics process. That was very strange because it's included in their coursework. And most of the lecturers actually put it in the e-learning management system that you need your ethics clearance before you can go on. It was the lectures that they complained about. And that was really strange that that is the big issue on the campus, that the lectures are not complying to the ethics clearance. And so for that, they are now doing all sorts of things by going from department to department. And just like Jackie said, we have faculty-wide faculty ethics committees. But now the other thing that jumped up, especially after COVID, was that the students, the alumni, the lecturers being over-surveyed. And they had to create another committee to make sure that there is not too many surveys going to the students or the alumni or to the same students with the same questions. So that is a very interesting thing that was now popping up, and that you need to put in another thing in place to ensure that the ethics process is going very, very well. So my interesting experience was with my American colleague that I had to do the ethics, and we had actually to go through courses, CITI courses, online courses, before we could even apply for the ethics. And I think that was really important, and I'm trying to propagate that on campus, that we also put that in place to make sure that everyone go through this training, online courses, because I thought, I know everything, you know. Who's telling me now anything new? And after I went through these courses, I realized, oh my goodness, there's things that I don't know. So that is really one of the things that we are propagating now. And then, of course, to get all these lectures that it's not always aware what to do on board. But I think at the bottom line to say that it's really important that the systems is very much in place. And I think that helps a lot. And that engaged research is really a challenge for everyone. So I'm very happy with the processes that I went through, that I could manage and sidekick and walk around all the slips and things for ethics committee, and I could manage to submit my ethics for my engaged research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martina. I think a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, everyone. We have about 10 to 15 minutes left for questions. So I think we'll take one round of questions and give our panelists a chance to respond. And if there's time left, we'll take more questions. Okay, one, two. The third one, I know it's Joyce, Nikki.
Thanks, Renee. I'm Joyce Suri from the Chemistry Department at Rhodes University. Peter mentioned the history behind ethics and that it comes out of the health department. And I want to know if there's anybody, as in not anybody, but anybody, that could take over ethics for social science research. It makes it difficult for social scientists to be linked to health research. There are certain things that I really think are quite unnecessary in social science ethics, but that the health research requires of us. Is there any way there can be a break between the two? Thank you.
Thank you. My question is around that thing of whose ethics. And or what I want to
What I'm grappling with, and I've been grappling with it since this morning, and now I'm wanting you to grapple with it because I don't know the answer, is when you get in a situation where you have directly conflicting ethics, and the example from this morning was we were talking about nursing students going into a certain community in KZN and how inappropriate it is for young women to wear short skirts or for the women to speak directly to the chief. Now, as a feminist, I'm like, women have been silenced for the last how many millennia? And now you're telling me I must tell my students, I mean, it's not me, it's somebody else, but to shut up because they're a woman, because in this context, it's not appropriate for a woman to speak. But in the context that we're working in, it's inappropriate for a woman to speak, and we're trying to balance the power balance between the university and the community, but we're also trying to redress issues to do with feminism, and so does all the... Do we need to then completely embrace the ethics of the community that we are working in, even when they're in direct contradiction to our, like, where do we sit? I'm going to stop because I don't know the answer.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Tim Stanton from California, interloping here at the conference. I really enjoyed the comments of all the panelists, and my question actually relates to the one we just heard about conflict and ethics committees, and they're kind of two-part question. The first one probably can be answered simply. On the Rhodes University Ethics Committee, is Monica the only community partner representative? And the second part of that question, whether yes or no, is how does Monica, particularly, but all the committee members, experience conflicts when they come up between community values and academic and particularly health discipline values? For instance, in the health professions, the value of confidentiality and privacy is very highly protected for all good reasons. In many communities, it's not that simple. Sometimes out of engaged research, community partners are looking for publicity, for spreading the message that comes out of the research, which can often invade privacy and confidentiality. And how do these kinds of conflicts get battled out in your committee, and what recommendations might you have?
Thank you very much. So just to sum up, Joyce's question was around social science ethics and whether it's possible to split the two. And Nikki was just asking around Ruth's ethics in the context of conflicting ethics. And I think Prof. Stanton added to that around conflicting as a confliction as it comes to ethics committees, specifically with Monica, and how does she experience the conflict between community values and our university institutional values?
Okay, I can easily do Joyce's question, and I think perhaps the others are better qualified to talk to the other areas. I think your question is, can ethics oversight be taken away from the NHREC, which falls under the health department? And this has been a proposal as soon as they became, the top of the pyramid for ethics in South Africa, and there've been a lot of engagements with them from University of South Africa. I think most of the engagements fall under the body I was involved with, were the forum under that body for the DVCs of research, and we had umpteen meetings with the health department and the NHREC. In the end of the day, the legislation is sitting there, and getting that legislation broadened or moved has been no progress has been made, let me put it that way, in terms of having an alternative body that is not falling particularly under the health department. And all the other health departments and ministries are running for the hills. They can see all the conflict that's happening. So nobody's putting up their hand and saying, wow, I'd like to take this on. However, and here Janet probably has additional insight, the NHREC has done quite a nice job of broadening their horizons and engaging with disciplines outside of health and really lightening up on the regulations or the interpretation of the regulations. So I think there is hope at the end of an ultimately very, very long tunnel. I'd like to say just one thing about the conflict of ethics and then pass it to my colleagues here who are in a good place to talk about that. But I think the most important thing said by the panel today is the thing that Monica said almost in her opening, that what might be ethical according to university processes might not be considered ethical by the community. And I think that is something that all researchers going out to the community should remember, that we end up fighting through an ethical process, and we were so happy to get that letter to say you've got ethics clearance, that we think we're ethical because we've got that. That is not a representation of reality at all. All ethics process on audit process, we are collecting little timestamps of evidence to show that we tried really hard. It's an abstraction. It's not reality. It's not a substitute for being sensitive to context and all the kinds of things that we've been brought up. It's just a process to say that, there is something here to check, that on a whole institutions are working from an ethical basis.
The question of how do we manage the ethical conflicts within the community. I must say that prior to the university intentionally introducing us as community partners to community-based participatory research, we're at a point where most of us were research fatigued, and because it's our university, it's our community, it's our children, we're just going through the motions of accommodation. But now, with CBPR, it has opened up space for more dialogue, for more engagement, for more understanding of all these processes around research. Because before there was no need to even understand the process. You just had to sit there and somebody comes and asks you questions and you answer and you close the chapter and that's it. But now we are beginning to see the mutual benefits that can come out of this research process. And what happened was that there was training for community partners around CBPR and these processes. And we quickly picked up on the fact that the issues around ethics were going to be problematic in the sense that there are some things and some approaches and some processes that are acceptable and make sense within the community in terms of how things are done, how things are culturally relevant, and so on and so forth. And we understood that this is a journey that we are going to take with the university in partnership. But it has not been as smooth because it is a new undertaking and because everybody has got to shift away from certain entrenched attitudes. But I must say that I feel like as community partners, we're faster because we're quick to say that we need a space where we can engage with academics on this issue of ethics and discuss it. We are still waiting 2 years after, but we are hopeful. So from there, then we'll be able to say, this is how we approach this question of ethics. At this point, I don't even care about the rest of South Africa, but as Makanda and as our university as a partner, because we want this thing to work. And what I'm saying is that it is a negotiated process, and we are willing to see what is going to come out of it.
I'd like to try and address your issue, if I can. I think perhaps more from an anthropological perspective. One of the most important lessons of anthropology is how difficult it is to get out of our own socialization and how important it is to try and put your preconceptions aside. So I understand your frustration, but I think in a situation like that, that's not the forum to fight that battle. And if you do have to say to the students, please wear long skirts, I feel it's more important for the outsider to try and fit in to the conventions of the community they are visiting. And that doesn't mean there aren't ways that you can find out things and maybe even change people's ideas and things in your ongoing engagement with them. But especially in the initial engagements, and when it is a matter of quite a patriarchal situation, as much as it might frustrate you, it's maybe not the kind of time and place to fight that battle. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you. I think your question really resonated with me because I've had similar struggles, but on a personal level. And but when I was very, very young, and I realized that I must go back to the purpose of what I'm doing in the community, and that I must take a step back. Tim Stanton, you first introduced me to John Dewey and the notion of moving from the I to the we, so and the collective we. So just going back to what is it that we have agreed on within the project. And maybe an example, I did a cultural tour, I was part of that, and we went to Indonesia. I was quite young in academia. We went to a village and we were told that we can't get off the bus unless we wear scarves and have our arms covered. And my immediate response was, but why, you know? And the rebel in me said, but why, when, you know, I don't agree with the whole idea. But then I realized there were many other issues. I was one of the few who got off the bus with my head covered. I was invited into one of the households of the family, and it initiated a conversation which I will never forget about water issues. And if I did not put that scarf on and just relax about my own issues, I don't think I would have had the door open for me. So yes, sometimes we have to wear the long skirts and we have to cover ourselves. And we have to, what they always say, look appropriate for the context. The doors won't open. And I think that is actually an idea for a very good project to look at, maybe some gender program that can be addressed. As my colleague mentioned, that there could be an appropriate forum where one could tackle these issues. But the doors will close. It might even jeopardize your safety in some of the communities if you step over that line, or you don't toe the line, as it were. But I do resonate with you. It's a continuous frustration. Thank you.
Oh, and I just want to add, as a community person here, to say that I do think that privilege is just assuming that your view is the correct view. And that when you walk into a community that is filled with individuals that are living within that community and doing things in a particular way, I think the priority should be first to seek to understand. And that can only happen if you are committed to building relationships, which is why I grapple with maybe academics that can come up and be speaking on community-based participatory research when they haven't done the work and they have been part of it, because it's not like just confined to university books. It's an experience and you need to be in it. And you cannot build a relationship, you come in and you're already finding fault. Then there can be no learning, there can be no influence, and there can be no change.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you also for the questions. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the session. I'm sure we can sit here the whole day and talk about ethics. And as all the panelists were talking, it just took me back to what Prof. Keet said yesterday around engagement, where he said we need a new energy and a new spirit of engagement. And I think it also links up beautifully with what Margaret said around spirit. So I'd just like to end off and say what we also need, based on what all of you have said, is a new spirit and a new energy for engaged research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renee Ostazen and colleagues for such an insightful and deep conversation around ethics. Colleagues, I'm sure you're all excited for tonight. We have a gala dinner. We have a gala dinner tonight starting at 7 o'clock at the Wyvern Club at Kingswood College. And we are definitely looking forward to seeing everyone there, all nicely dressed up or as beautiful as you are. I'm definitely also looking forward to it. Thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure engaging with all of you.